It's this understanding where physical, technical, and procedural design help influence the environment within the building and ultimately enable the security team to control that space better.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Security by design and building security is increasingly in the remit of today's protector. Today, we're really pleased to welcome Chris Aldous, founder of Design Security Ltd, great friend here in the UK of many people that listen to this podcast. It's going to be a pleasure to look at this topic, but also quite where the trusted advisor sort of fits in. I'm here with Elijah Shaw, and together I think this is quite an evolving topic. Elijah, why is this important for the protector community, particularly now?
Here's why the topic's important. Because this is a subject that we as protectors don't normally discuss. And so our listeners are listening to this, listening to Chris, subject matter expert, and getting something that they wouldn't normally get elsewhere. And if that little piece of information helps them be more successful in the detail, helps them get selected, makes them more valuable to a protectee, then it's all worth it.
But Elijah, with ever-increasing demands from principals for more adventurous and more outlandish security systems, isn't the real skill the ability to say no? The ability to be the department of yes, but, and manage expectations.
Of course, everybody wants to be able to say yes to the principal. And in fact, I always joke about the one thing that a client never wants to hear is the word no.
Yeah.
Now, somewhere in the middle of that is yes, but. And you can say but, you just have to be able to give the realities of the situation. And part of that means that the foundation that you're talking about must be a foundation of knowledge. So you have to be very well versed in the topic. So that way, when you give them that counter and you say the but makes sense to them. And of course, some protectees are very set in their ways, are very stubborn, or very focus driven, and they know what they want. But that's why we strive to become subject matter experts. So that way, when we are discussing things, we're coming from a point where you can offer the realities of the situation, and whether those are, budget constraints in the topics that we're talking about today, those are, questions about the infrastructure, like this can't happen because of this, but also offering alternative solutions is always helpful.
And that's actually probably where we should frame this. Security by design, yes, has its own skill set, and we're going to learn from Chris, quite a bit on that. But the managing of expectations and citing security by design as one pillar of your trusted advisor career, and yes, I get it, some people don't want to ever become a trusted advisor, some people want to go into training, and some people want to retire completely. I get it, but if you are going to be a trusted advisor, then this might be one of the key strings to your bow. So let's get into it. Looking forward to speaking with Chris Aldous about security by design in relation to EP.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit Magazine.
Security by design and its implications for executive security. We're delighted today to welcome Chris Aldous, founder, owner of Design Security Ltd. Sean West and myself, we're delighted to have you on. How are you doing?
Great to be here. Thanks very much. Quite an interesting topic we've got to talk around, and I look forward to hopefully imparting a little bit of my hard-won knowledge back to a wider audience.
Perfect. Well, that's what we like to hear. That's what we're trying to achieve. But then let's get into it. Let's frame the problem. Like, why on earth are we talking about this anyway? What is the problem with the security by design that we really need to solve right now? But it's not solved.
Okay. In my view, I think there's just a complete lack of understanding of how securing through that design process for a new build or even an existing build is forgotten about. People reshape buildings, remodel, but they don't consider security at the outset. And even though they know they're likely to put in the typical things, CCTV, access control, intruder detection, which are technical systems, but then they don't consider, well, what can we change about the environment of our building to make it less susceptible to crime? I mean, if you look back realistically, it had its roots back in the 70s through crime prevention and environmental design, and that's come on because it will apply within a built environment. And the police here in the UK have tried to push forward that secured by design type idea, which was mainly focused around housing developments, because trying to reduce the amount of burglaries. But if you take the same principles on, any business operation, in theory, should be looking to protect its assets against a defined risk element. And therefore, understanding that built environment and what you can do leads them to have a lower risk profile. Unfortunately, not many people understand it.
Okay, well, hopefully we can clear that up for a few people in today's session. But let's talk just briefly, about you. Where does your passion for this topic come from?
That's a good question. For me, it's because I've seen it done wrong so many times. I've been reliant on, don't worry, that wall will prevent this happening to you. This door will prevent that happening to you, only to find out that they don't. Some hard lessons learned. So now for me, it's about being able to take the knowledge that I've been very fortunate to gain on some really significant projects and look at that to say, okay, this is the problem. How do we tell the architect what to draw? What walls I need, what doors I need. How do I impart my knowledge to the operational side? How many security officers are going to need? And that's where I find my drive is being able to link together the physical, the technical, and inform that procedural.
Okay, no, that's fantastic, and I know you've mentioned in the past some of your high-profile projects, which are amazing. And I guess you mentioned before awareness, right, being an issue. But let's just ask that as our final quickfire question, I suppose. What should the completely uninitiated security professional, do to start becoming aware? And in particular, I'm thinking, what should the EP professional who's completely unaware about this do?
It's like all things. You don't know what you don't know. But what we try to encourage, particularly a lot of my work is spent with architectural teams, etc., is try to encourage them to look at seeking expert advice. Like here in the UK, we're quite lucky. Depending on what sort of project you're working on, there may be a directive there that you must engage with somebody that's on the RSES register, so that's a register of security engineers and specialists, or a chartered security professional, or what's commonly termed as a suitably qualified security specialist. So there's certain criteria that if they're going to look for certain planning to be able to answer some planning requirements, they need to engage with the right sort of person. As an industry, what we're poor at, because most of these, when you mention, and I always call it the dirty S word, when you mention security, most people think it's physical guarding, cameras, and that's it. So it's saying, no, in actual fact, there's a whole wider estate there that needs to be considered, because it's all right putting a camera up, but then if you've got nobody to respond to it, or the response is going to be so slow, then it still doesn't really buy down the risk. So it's this getting the industry, the wider industry, to say, look, if you're going to go down all these routes and you're going to deal in a built environment, then go and speak to somebody that works in the built environment security side of life, that can help point you in the right direction, rather than just throwing lots of staff and kit and equipment are a problem, because chances are you may be able to change the environment with a simple planning change, or speak better to your lighting contractor and increase light levels, which may have a better impact on pushing crime and antisocial behaviour, or whatever the problem tends to be, away from your building. The other aspect I will say about this is, all too often we always think all of our threats come from outside of our buildings, when most were actually we would have been already allowed them in. So again, it's this understanding where physical, technical and procedural design help influence the environment within the building, and ultimately enable the security team to control that space better.
That's a great response, Chris, and it's really interesting, because I've had a lot of experience myself in working for high net worth individuals, and it was a huge learning process when I've stepped into some roles and we've carried out renovations. There's been renovations carried out on the property, and I've been involved in upgrading the security systems and bringing in the relevant contractors to do so. And some of the things you mentioned there, some things I've had experience of, which, if you're not aware, you like exactly what you said, security industry doesn't do it well. And sometimes it's a dirty word. And a lot of the time when high net worth does a renovation on a building, security is the last thing that's considered. They just think, yes, we'll stick some cameras up and some alarm system and everything's cool. But a lot of the time they'll do the renovation and now put these cameras there, but you can't do it because you haven't, exactly what you said, you haven't gone through the planning. And if you're working on, these high net worth individuals, they like to buy nice buildings. It could be a grade 1, grade 2 listed building, and you can't just go chasing the walls out on these places. There's a lot of planning aspects of how you can do that and keep the building looking as good as it could be, how it's meant to look. It's really interesting. But our community is more executive protection. So I was just wondering, is there any sort of lessons that, as an executive protection professional, is there any lessons they can learn about the level of security by design in a given building?
Yeah, we often get asked to go and review security at buildings, and the first thing we're trying to do is say, well, against what do you want us to review? Because if we don't understand what that design basis threat is and what it's likely to, how that attacker profile comes at the building and the systems, etc., then it's very hard to sort of turn around to the client and say, yeah, you've got a perfectly secure space here, etc. So understanding that threat profile is always key when you start looking at the physical, the technical and the procedural controls that the security team, or in a lot of cases, it's just the facilities management team, think that they've got. Okay, so defining that and being realistic about it helps inform the process for identifying whether you've got good security or no. If this particular scenario happens, you may as well all pack your bags and run. Right. So, but how do we point people at it? I mean, what we tend to ask at the outset is, how old is the building? Because understanding the ages of the building give us some indications of some of the build techniques that would have been used in those periods to do the initial construction, and whether it's likely to stand up or fall down, etc. Obviously, the international location of a building, because you get different build techniques in different parts of the world. You go to America, everything's timber. Out in the sticks, a lot of the houses are just timber framed and then clad. Obviously, cities, skyscrapers, etc., they tend to be steel frame and then clad. You go to the Middle East, they're more likely to be all poured concrete and lots of rebar. So understanding those elements help you understand, okay, if this is the threat my EP team are trying to deal with, this is what the structure of the building should give us as a level of resistance.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said earlier as well. You mentioned something about something not working. And I believe I've experienced this myself, and you can go in, you can question a team and say, so how do you stop this threat, or what have you got in place to stop this? And they'll say, I don't know, it's this door there is a whatever they call it door, and this will stop someone coming through. I'll say, what happens if you if you do this, and they say, well, that will stop it. And then you can just give it a nudge or something. Maybe not a great example, but then the door opens and they're like, oh, we thought this would stop this. And it's until things are stress tested that third time. So, you know, a lot of people will, you know, pull the wool and say, yeah, we've put this system in place. That's it. And that's what they'll explain to their clients and principals. And yes, you've now got this system. You're now secure. But they don't have people then to come and stress test what has been installed and what the system's meant to do, and does it actually work and do what it says on the tin.
Yeah, you often see. I was asked to look at a building not long ago, and ultimately the operator of the building was saying, "Look, I've had this security review done. Is there anything we can ignore?" And I said, "Well, that first one there where it says make sure that the glazing in the window is blast resistant." They said, and this is all this glazing's up in the roof of the building. And they said, "Why is that?" I said, "Because it's pointless. Your building will fall down around you because you've got no control over vehicles getting up to and into your building. You can't stop anything. So I wouldn't worry about doing the glass on your roof until you can secure your perimeter and prevent a vehicle getting close enough to collide with your structure." So it's those little things. If you haven't got tried and tested products out there, as you say, stress tested products, you know, here in the UK, we're very fortunate because there's a lot of testing goes on. You know, I mention to people, "Oh, have a look in the Red Book." No, it's not the one that Chairman Mao wrote all those years ago. This is the loss prevention certification book. You know, where they test things against forced entry, and they actually list out the types of tools that they test. All these tools and techniques we know get used by criminal operators. So, you know, this gives you the portfolio. You can then look for, you know, thickness suppliers of walls that will withstand that level of physical violence to give you time to do stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not the most ornate objects, some of these, but when you start looking at, okay, well, we're only going to deploy this for, say the panic room area, and we're only going to be in the panic room, we estimate, no more than half an hour to hold in place, by which stage, because here in the UK, we do have a pretty good policing organisation, and hopefully they'll come to our aid. But, you know, it's people understanding what that threat is, how long they've got to be able to withstand the threat, and what that response is going to be, because that all influences then the wider design. You know, if you know that your response is going to be there within 10 to 15 minutes, then, you know, put in a wall that will give you 20 minutes, so you've got a little bit of leeway. It's those sorts of practical considerations. But like you say, Sean, with ultra high net worth individuals, it can be a different argument there. So again, it's you know, we've recently completed a project where he doesn't want lots of cameras everywhere. He wants to know what everybody else is doing, but he doesn't want to be in that surveillance envelope himself. So we've looked at different ways that, you know, he's able, if you like, to blank out the bits where he is, and his CP team can control that, and nobody else can, you know. So if we understand what the requirement is, we can normally find a design approach to satisfy both the client's thinking and also the EP team's commander, who say, well, I don't want him to be in a, you know, I don't want him to fall into a black hole. I want to be able to see what's going on around him. So we have done those sorts of things in the past.
Yeah, it's a funny world, the high net worth world. You know, they can have the best advisors in the world. They can afford to pay them, but generally they want what they want. You can give them all the best advice in the world, and then you find a lot of the time they go with, you know, what they want to do anyway. And sometimes they take it on board and it's great. Sometimes they don't. And then, you know, you can get away with it and it's fine and nothing ever happens. But when it goes wrong, it's like, why haven't you done this? But, you know, we told you this on, you know, day dot, but you didn't listen to that advice.
But that's a key thing, because a lot, you know, at the end of the day, we consult on security, and for us, it's about saying to the client, you know, whoever they are, that's what you've told us your problem is. this is where we've assessed the risk. They've agreed to that. Then we then say, well, these are the control measures, and one of those control measures is accept it and get on. And if they say, yeah, we'll accept it and get on, well, there we go, sign here. We've done as much as we can at that point, because if they've gone, yes, now you've made us aware of the risk, we're happy with the control regime we've got, we're going to continue to carry that risk as part of our appetite. Fine, they might review that decision down the line and then want to implement further controls, but at least it's on their risk register. And we do find a lot of organizations don't even have a basic risk register, which consider the security elements coming into play.
It's a lot of time it comes down to cost as well. I mean, of course, all of these people want everything and they want it now, but then as soon as you put everything together and you say, this is what it's going to cost, it's like, ouch, I wasn't expecting that level of cost. Okay, so yeah, we can accept that risk because it's not cheap. It costs a lot of money to provide such a service and level of security.
Yeah, or at least they can build it into their, if they do, have a bit of a long-term plan, at least you can then build it into that cost register to say, okay, this is a project in itself, because let's be, things like hostile vehicle mitigation measures, you just don't, when I say they don't fall off the back of a lorry, they're expensive, so it's this, okay, we know we've got a risk, what can we do in the short term to reduce that as much as possible? And in the long term, we'll maybe go for a planned installation of control measures, etc. But ultimately, for us, it's about giving the parties the knowledge to say, this is where you sit, these are the controls, this will take a year to get done. That's something you can do here and now to reduce the risk, or like I say, just accept it.
No, interesting. In the executive protection sector, it's a short career span really, and people need to move on and look at developing their careers because they're not going to be a bodyguard forever. We all age, get older, and we have to have different skills.
I'm only 21.
We all have to develop our careers, and a lot of people get taken on as trusted advisors to their principal or look to go in to become a security consultant. So how can someone who's got a career in executive protection, can they incorporate security by design as a skill set? Or how do they partner with other experts to deliver the advice to their principals and clients?
I would certainly look at some of the well-known courses out there. My own sort of background, I originally, having finished doing all the silly stuff and running around all the dangerous places of the world, thought, how do I civilianize and make sense of what I know? So I went through the ACES route and did the CPP, PSP. They're okay. They give you a big bookshelf to put all your books on, but they give you a good way to formalize. When I say formalize an argument, you as we've touched on earlier, there's always a cost. Everything we do, there's a cost. So it's a way to rationalize that cost and then present that back to a client. There are other courses out there. So I would say to people is look at the things like the CSMP, slightly different. They still use similar materials from the CPP, PSP, but that what they actually try to get out of you or out the people that take part, you actually have to understand the problem and then look through all your books and come and and write up a mitigation strategy. So it's not just a case, the CPP, PSP tends to be learn these books. When you see this question, tick the box. So because when you and I've fallen foul of this myself in back in the early days, is there is a lot of not resentment, but you have to spend a lot of time knowing your subject in order to influence architects and mechanical electrical designers and door specialists, etc., as to why you want to do it a particular way. So those courses help you put the building block in place. And then individuals have then, in many respects, got to go out and get some practical experience, because not all doors are the same, not all windows are the same, and so on and so forth.
No, it's good advice, actually. I mean, like I said, I've had experience of implementing things, and I know you talk about doors. I remember a recent experience with renovation we have going on out one property in the capital, and the building contractors, they all ploughed on with all of the work that they're doing. That AVIT teams, the security, CCTV team, like different contractors that were coming in. And when we're talking about doors, and it's amazing the amount of doors and different levels of protection you can put in, but to keep the decoration of the door, and it was going backwards and forwards with the architect who went in a different direction. And I says, no, this is what the client wants, so we have to make this work in this manner. And it was, we got to it, we got it worked out. But yeah, it's right, we just said that by doing it a different way and learning them skills, you'd have the building blocks to, I don't know, strengthen your argument, I guess. Yeah.
We're still on a project at the moment, which the client originally came out with some quite robust physical control measures. Unfortunately, the developer had not understood what those control measures would be. And then you start saying, well, that door's, here you've got a number of doors, that door you're not going to buy from B&Q. There's only one supplier for that door. You're looking at 9 to 15 grand a door. Weight wise, it's going to be around about 200, maybe 250 kilos. That changes their build methodology completely. I said, and then if you were planning stud partition walls, they won't support, a standard stud partition wall won't support that door. And this is what you'll need to do to the wall. And then, but that's all increased weight within the building. Yeah. But then if you'd asked us at the beginning of this project, then we could have highlighted some of these complications to you before you've run off down the let's get it up quick and move on.
Yeah. And they're under a lot of stress, I guess, from the end user, the client, because they want their new home or property estate. I want it yesterday. Yeah. So everyone's under the same stress and pressures, I guess.
But it's, if you can sit with the architect, if you work with the client and you can sit with the architect, because sometimes the architects don't interpret the brief, or there isn't enough analysis of the brief in the security context. When you start breaking it down, because then you can sit with the architect and say, well, here this wall will need to be up armored, and therefore any doors, any penetrations through this wall, because then the architect has now got a better understanding of how it's going to impact on their packages, because everything we do is broken into different packages. So it's this, right. And I'm doing stuff at the moment with architects, if you like, a walkthrough, talk through. If they say this is what it leads to. This is what you've got to consider to try and educate people better.
Yeah, I think on a lot of these projects, you need a good project manager at the helm. He holds everyone to account. You're going around the table. Okay, every Wednesday, 2:00, we have this Zoom meeting, whatever. You've got Sean, right? Where are you with your work? Chris, where are you? What problems are you facing? It holds everyone to account, and everyone knows exactly where they are, where they're at. This will be done by next week. I need this doing. And you need someone to crack the whip, who's an independent. Yeah, that's working for the client, and they don't have association with the other businesses involved in the development and build. But yeah, no, definitely a good project manager is worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, very much so, very much so.
So what is your advice to, I guess, the people in the trusted advisor role who are looking to implement security solutions or harden their ultra high net worth principals home with regards to system selection, building selection? What advice have you got to give?
Define define the operational element. What is it that what is it we're trying to protect, and where? Obviously, from an EP perspective, the focus is the principle. But then you say, okay, if X happens, we go into this nice little, we want to hold in place within the building. Fine. What systems in the building make that space inhabitable? What could be, from an attacker's perspective, something that they could damage, they can control, okay, that would now make the space uninhabitable and force the team to now make a move? Because again, once they're now out in the open, they're easier to deal with. And that, so it's looking at the problem from an attacker's perspective, because you've defined that design basis threat. What is it we now have as a control, and do those controls still work given those scenarios? And if they don't work, what is it we've got to change? Okay, so certainly, if you like, walking back over your own notes. I mean, I've written strategies numerous times for different things and how the building from a security perspective works, but I always get somebody else to read it, because just to make sure, one, that the terminology I'm using is understood, and flesh out and highlight likely impacts of those changes on how we do things. So certainly always walk your ground, understand your operational brief, but then look at all the physical and technical elements that need, or that you need for that scenario to work in your favor, and then see how susceptible those elements are to somebody either negligently or maliciously damaging them. Simple things like, if let's say you're in an office complex. All office complexes normally got a centralized fire system. You might have tenanted offices which have their own controls, but ultimately the core of the building's got a fire system. How easy is it to initiate a fire system and force a building evacuation? Because ultimately we're always about, let's save life. Yeah, but there are, spilling hundreds of people out of a building creates another issue that you now need to manage. So it's looking at and understanding how the building controls work in the various scenarios, what they were originally designed to do for you, and how they then work if they're stress tested, if somebody's doing something maliciously.
No, I think you're right. And I think, a lot of people, they may think the best solution is to just throw money at it, get the greatest system out there. But then, it falls down if your staff aren't briefed on how to use that. Exactly what you said, how to react in this situation. When the alarm goes off, if they don't know what to do and they're just sat there like a rabbit in the headlights, then whatever money you've spent on that system is wasted, and the system's already fell down. So the system's not just about the technical aspect you put in, it's also training on the system for your staff, on the procedures.
Yeah.
How to deal with the different scenarios that can occur.
Everybody talks about the operational requirement. So when you develop that baseline tool, you're looking at, okay, what is the problem? Then what are the control measures we can bring in to help mitigate it? So if you go through that simple process, you like say you do get that owl moment, that I never thought of it like that, because I say a lot of what we do is designed to make the buildings operable and try and make them as resilient as possible to some of the issues. We've done critical control rooms. You can't afford the mains power to go, and yet the client says, yeah, but we're happy with not putting in generators. Fine, sign here, because the mains power is going to go sooner or later. And so it's these elements that, if they're there, test them. And have you ever black building tests where you literally take the building off the mains just to see what still runs? because sometimes, you get people say, oh yeah, don't worry, it's all covered by a reserve generation system. And then you realize that nobody's ever tested the reserve generator and it's now empty. The spiders are all over it. So if you're told a system's there and it works, say, well, where's the proof when you last tested it, when it last works? And that's the same with your alarms, fire alarms, intruder alarms, etc. When were they last tested? How are they maintained? Fortunately, here in the UK, we've got quite a good, there are standards there, etc. To review against. But you go abroad and you don't necessarily have the same level of due diligence that you can rely and go and go back into to see whether things have actually been done.
Yeah.
I like that, and it reminds me of our previous episode on hotel security, where a quick walkthrough of the emergency procedure found that the emergency door was bolted shut. Things like that, and I love the examples you gave about doors. I think on a previous session we had an example. Someone had installed such a 200 kilo door, but they got through the side wall with a mallet. So obviously swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
How about a sensationalist question for you? Something future looking, something that's just absolutely out there. What tech is coming down the pipeline that you think people are going to get excited about? I remember at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, everyone was saying, I've got to get a Faraday cage, got to stop all these EMP pulses, which, to be fair, if we're in that stage, we've got a bigger problem. But what can people get excited about in terms of tech coming down the pipeline?
Tech-wise, the drones have been bumbling around for quite a while, but we've seen them used to great effect, both by in the Syrian area and now again in the Ukraine, as a means, as a standoff weapon system. But the other things, when I look at physical attack and competency of burglars and robbers, you look at, well, what hand tools are changing now. Some of the battery powered hand tools and the angle grinders, 18, 20 volt angle grinders that very quickly can get through most obstructions. So I'd not just worry about the Gucci stuff. I'd worry about what you can pick up at the hardware store that can be used to breach your doors or windows in a forced entry. A lot of the sites I deal with, where we look at that physical element, the big thing is that procedural response, because now we're putting the member of staff that locks and unlocks the building, I think, at greater risk. If there's something there that attracts an attacker, then the easiest way to overcome all those physical controls is with the key. And the person who holds the key is the little old person that you employ to lock and unlock that building. So what's the duress process that you're going to put in place to help safeguard that individual? Yeah.
Wow. I didn't think of it that way. I of course, everything that, we used to sort of talk about things you can buy on Alibaba that used to be the preserver of nation states. People were talking about laser microphones being £1.99. But of course, an angle grinder or just anything like that, that's pretty impressive from an attacker's point.
Like I say, it doesn't all have to be Gucci. Yes, you might use your laser microphone. And again, when you look at, you've got to understand what that threat element is. How skilled is this aggressor likely to be? Are they likely to employ that sort of technique? A lot of things. I was watching some video the other day of a guy in his big Range Rover on the King's Road, his windows open, his hand hanging out there with his nice big watch on, and the bikers just stopped around him, showed a machete. He's like, yeah, here you go. It's like, try keep your windows up. Don't put your blingy wrist out. It's little things that can have a big impact. So it's not always the high tech element. It can be just that brute force attack profile, and we've seen quite a few top end footballers lose a few wristwatches. I'm fortunate, you see. They slide off normally.
That's for our listeners. Chris has unique wristwatch regalia.
I've got a wrist, no hand. There we go, in basic terms.
Very good. Well, I love this. What's next for you, Chris? Where can people find you?
They can find me through my webpage, which is www.designsecurity.ltd.com. I'm normally kicking around some of the design and build shows, although personally I spend more time at things like Future Build and that, because that's where people tend to be who want to buy design security skill sets. But by all means, you can push out my email address and web address. I'm quite happy if people have got queries or questions, just to run through some, you might want to look at this and look at that as an aspect.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll do that in our show notes on the Second Magazine podcast. But no, this is great fun, and I think as people are preparing for the summer, and some people may go away, maybe this is good preparation for such an occasion. I don't know, but Security by Design. It's been fantastic having you on, Chris. From Sean and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Second Magazine podcast. Thank you very much to Chris Aldous. I know you've spoken at a great many events, and it's wonderful to have your insight, and especially why this matters for EP today. And I don't know about you, but I definitely feel that I now need some sort of 200 kilo door, although, as you rightly pointed out, Chris, it's not going to be held up by the walls. And that's really the point, because no matter how much your principal wants something, there is some consideration now, especially old buildings, new buildings, listed buildings, lots and lots of security by design. Elijah, what did you take away from today?
Well, the biggest takeaway from me for this is how great an interviewer Sean is. But, I just really like the way Chris kind of can convey the topic that we don't spend a lot of time thinking about. There's a good friend of mine, Benjamin Azzoli, and he's the one that opened my eyes to this topic. And, in the way that he approaches security, he, pulls in a lot of environmental factors and takes those into consideration. He works primarily in Africa, and in some of the countries that he's in, just because there's so many challenges, you have to stack the deck. And so when he's dealing with his protectees, he's making sure that, in addition to the physical security plan and the manpower, etc., you're taking into consideration those environmental builds.
And that's why it was absolutely crucial that we had Sean on this, because, that's what Sean does day in, day out, manage expectations and integrate into the most interesting of buildings, which, is a massive extension of his, role as a trusted advisor. So, Elijah, what have we got coming up that we want people to know about?
Oh, in terms of things coming up, what I'm most excited for is the fact that I'm finally going to get the opportunity to do one of my Icon Advanced courses. So that's a 10-day course. So normally I do a 5-day course, and sometimes it's even a 3-day course. The challenge is because of my schedule. And that 3-day course or 5-day course is on celebrity protection and behavioral intelligence. But I have this 10-day class, and it's really a great one. And I bring some of the heavy hitters in the industry, and we do some things that are really unique to the industry in terms of offering the students of the course just things that they can't get anywhere else. And so I finally committed to carving some time out. It's going to be at the end of September into October. I believe that's September 26th to October 5th. If anyone's interested, feel free to drop me a line. The website is www.industry-icon.com/training, or shoot me a message on any of the socials. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it. But that's the thing I'm most excited about. That, of course, the way you can definitely connect with me about this and anything else is inside the NABA Protector app. And so inside the app, there's communications that are going on all the time from individuals all over the world and some really wonderful networking opportunity. I just got back from Canada, and while I was in Canada, I worked with a number of different protectors there, and it's just amazing that people could have different backgrounds, even speak different languages, but if we all have that kind of core principles and understand the foundational aspects of close protection work, you could fit right in, gel together, and hopefully come out on the other side with a successful mission. So yeah, that's it for what I'm most excited about coming up.
And I was really pleased to see so many protectors at an event in person, but also hybrid, in the Monument on Cyber-Physical Convergence.
Hey, brother, the last thing I want to say is, you do a masterful job with all the events that you have. Again, it's a wide variety of topics, but I found them all to be beneficial to us as a protection community. So I do want to salute you for that. You're a valuable part of the Circuit family and Circuit Media, and we've got some really exciting things coming up for the end of this year, but definitely for 2023.
Well, that's very kind. Thanks very much for your support as well. And of course, you out there, our BBA and NABA members, for coming to all these events. It's great to bring everyone along on a journey of discovery. Well, thank you very much to Chris Aldous for today's amazing session. I think Security by Design, it's just such a natural fit for today's protector and tomorrow's future special advisor to high net worth. So, from Elijah and myself, thank you very much. This has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
Later, everybody.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.
Well, that's very kind. Thanks very much for your support as well. And of course, you out there, our BBA and NABA members, for coming to all these events. It's great to bring everyone along on a journey of discovery. Well, thank you very much to Chris Aldous for today's amazing session. I think Security by Design, it's just such a natural fit for today's protector and tomorrow's future special advisor to high net worth. So, from Elijah and myself, thank you very much. This has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.